So my cat and I are here to talk to you about the SAR Clade. SAR is an acronym for the three major subclades of the SAR Clade. And in there we're going to find 7 phyla that we're interested in, among others. There are many, many others in there. But we are interested in these: Bacillariophyta, Phaeophyta, Dinoflagellata, Apicomplexa, Coleophora, Radiolaria, and Foraminifera. So S in the SAR clade is for Stramenopila. Stramenopila means straw hair, which refers to the flagella on Stramenopiles. They have one hairy flagellum, sometimes referred to as a tinsel flagellum, and then they have another one which is hairless, which is called the whiplash flagellum. And we see this in a lot of these Stramenophiles. It's one of the things that unites them. So our first phylum of the Stramenophiles that we're going to talk about are the Bacillariophyta. The Bacillariophyta are more frequently called diatoms. They are photosynthetic. We find them in aquatic habitats, both marine and freshwater. They have a cell wall in addition to a frustule, which is glass-like or siliceous, made up of 2 parts or valves. So valve is a term commonly used in biology for something that's like a shell, like the shell of an oyster or a clam. Those are both in the mollusk order Bivalvia, meaning they've got 2 shells. By and large, diatoms can be found either in a centric pattern or in a pinnate pattern. Centric means sort of round or roundish in the outline. Pinnate means, when I hear pinnate, I think peanut, and it's sort of more elongate. Some even do kind of look like peanuts. They do have a form of asexual reproduction, which has an accompanying decrease in size, which I'll explain in a moment. And like us, they exhibit gametic meiosis. So the organisms are diploid until they are ready to produce gametes. And one of the main products derived from diatoms is a substance called diatomaceous earth. And diatomaceous earth is mined from areas that have lots and lots and lots of deposits of these frustules that have accumulated over very long periods. And diatomaceous earth is used for abrasive properties. It's also used for filtering things. Very handy stuff, this diatomaceous earth. So here you can see a centric diatom. See how it's kind of circular in appearance? Okay, it looks like a triangle, but you can see how it's not elongate. It kind of looks like you could draw a circle around the edge of it. And a lot of very beautiful, very richly ornate diatoms that come in these 2 halves, or frustules, that nest within each other, kind of like a petri dish or like a box with a lid on it. And here's some of the diversity of diatoms. You can see some are very round or circular, whereas some are more elongate. So these elongate ones are the pinnate varieties, and these rounder ones are the centric types. So the petri dish model, you can kind of see here that when they go through this asexual reproduction, each of the daughter diatoms gets one of the valves. And there's a rule with these valves, which is that when the 2 valves separate, you can only produce a new frustule inside the valve that you inherit. So this valve can continue to produce the same size offspring in every generation because it just replaces this smaller valve. But the smaller valve can only replace its second frustule on the inside of that. So it's going to get smaller, and then when this diatom divides, one of these frustules is going to have to replace the other half with a smaller frustule, and so on and so forth. And this can't go on forever. You don't get an infinite regression. When they reach a certain size, then that's a trigger for these diatoms to undergo meiosis and form gametes. So this type of reproduction is reminiscent of these Matryoshka dolls, which are these Russian nesting dolls. But a very interesting aspect of diatom biology. The Phaeophyta are your brown algae, and here we can see this phyta ending again. That phyta ending suggests that something is plant-like. It comes from the Greek word for plant. Pheo, this prefix here, means brown. The Phaeophyta are marine algae. They're photosynthetic. Typically, they're large. They're actually multicellular. Many types of kelp are in the brown algae. And as they are macroscopic and multicellular, they actually produce different types of tissues. So they have a structure called a holdfast, stipe, which is kind of akin or analogous to a stem, a thallus. Thallus means body. A blade, like the blade of a leaf, and meristems, which are zones of active cell growth. They also produce a useful substance called algin, which they use to support the body underwater, and they engage in sporic meiosis, or alternation of generations. So here you can see one of our multicellular brown algae, type of kelp in a kelp forest. And here you can see a diagram showing the different structures that we can identify within a kelp. Here's the holdfast, which is kind of analogous to the roots that anchor it to the ocean floor. Here we have a stipe, the stem-like structure. And then we have these leafy-like things, which are the blades. And some of them have pneumatocysts, or gas bladders, that help these things to float towards the light. And then there are reproductive structures at the ends of these blades. And we find the meristems down here at the base of the blades of the blades. So two phyla of Stramenophiles. We just have for us to consider, just those Bacillariophyta and the Phaeophyta. A in SAR Clade is for alveolates. And alveolates all have these structures within their cell membranes called alveoli, which are kind of like little pockets within the plasma membrane. We have alveoli in our lungs, and just like in the alveolates, our alveoli are like little pockets where air collects in our lungs and is transferred to the capillaries in the lungs, and that's how we oxygenate our body. The alveoli are the organs of transfer, but that's analogous to these alveoli here in our alveolates that have these membrane gaps. First phylum within the Alveolata are the Dinoflagellata, or the Dinoflagellates is a common name for this phylum. These protists are both marine and freshwater, typically aquatic. Some are free-living, some are photosynthetic. Many of them are endoparasitic, meaning they live inside their host and have an intimate relationship with them. Some of them, when they do have chloroplasts, they are symbiotic in origin, and they have different colored pigments within those chloroplasts. And they reproduce, like many other protists, by longitudinal fission, so along the long axis. Dinoflagellata have two flagella, like flagellata, but that's not what the dino prefix means. Dino means whirling, and when you see some of them, you'll see why they are the whirling flagellated organisms. They have a transverse flagellum in a groove called a cingulum, which is circumferential. So the circumference goes around and around, right? They also have a longitudinal flagellum in a groove called a sulcus. So they have these two grooves called a cingulum and a sulcus, and most of them have cellulose plates called thecae, which is one that's called a theca, that are embedded within the alveoli. We've got a couple of examples to show you here. One used to be called Gymnodinium, the naked dinoflagellate. Gymno means naked. But now that's recognized to be in a different genus called Carenia, Noctiluca, and Symbiodinium. So we've kind of got the good, the bad, and, well, the beautiful, I guess you could say. But not necessarily in that order. Let's start with the bad. Oh, sorry. Let's look at some pictures of dinoflagellates with their cellulosic thecae. And you can see that they kind of have these suits of armor around them. And the arrangement of the thecae tells us what group of dinoflagellates, what genus, what family of dinoflagellate we're looking at. And you can see they have the groove. So here we've got the cingulum, right? The transverse circumferential groove. That is the cingulum that goes around and around and around. And then they've got this sulcus for that other flagellum. So when they swim, they've got this one flagellum that's wrapped around them in this groove, which causes them to spin as they move along in the direction, the locomotion is in the direction that the flagellum and the sulcus is propelling them. So our first representative of the Dinoflagellata does not even have those thecae. It is called Carenia, formerly known as Gymnodinium brevis, and it causes this phenomenon. This is called red tide, not to be confused with the crimson tide, but red tide is produced when you have a large bloom or lots and lots and lots of proliferation of this particular naked dinoflagellate called Carenia brevis. And red tide you may have heard of, especially if you're down in the Gulf, because it's very dangerous. When you have a great abundance of Carenia brevis, it can serve as a poison to the shellfish that grow in coastal areas, as well as to other types of fish, bony fish. And if you eat shellfish that have been contaminated by Carenia brevis or by the compound they produce called brevetoxins. So here's an example of a brevetoxin. This is a neurological toxin, so if you eat oysters or shellfish that are contaminated with these brevetoxins, it can make you sick. So that's one of the reasons why we get told not to eat oysters in months that don't have R in them.